Okay, so this is a video response to Spawktalk about the Austrian theory of value, which he finds to be vacuous hogwash, I believe. And those aren't his words, those are mine, but that's what I pulled from the video. Um, and I'm also, when I get some time, going to try to make a response to his video about war. But until I get a chance to watch the video response he mentioned in his video, I'm not going to do that because I don't want to cover any ground that was talked about by someone else. At any rate, he talks a lot about Rothbard's definition of value in Man, Economy, and State, about how he kind of interchangeably uses the words happiness, satisfaction, utility, and that he never really defines them. And I think that's actually a pretty fair criticism of Rothbard. This is one of the reasons that I've so far preferred reading Mises. Mises, I think, gives a much better definition and understanding to the concept of value than does Rothbard. But first, I want to get to a little bit about before I go into that aspect of it. What is happiness in the Austrian sense? Mises talks about this throughout human action, and reiterates time after time that the economist only uses the term happiness in the most formal sense. I'm going to read this quote. It's on page 14 of Human Action. It's a section on happiness. In colloquial speech, we call a man, quote, happy, who has succeeded in attaining his ends. A more adequate description of his state would be that he is happier than he was before. There is, however, no valid objection to a usage that defines human action as the striving for happiness. But we must avoid current misunderstandings. The ultimate goal of human action, is always the satisfaction of the acting man's desire. There is no standard of greater or lesser satisfaction other than individual judgments of value, different for various people and for the same people at various times. What makes a man feel uneasy and less uneasy is established by him from the standard of his own will and judgment, from his personal and subjective evaluation. Nobody is in a position to decree what should make a fellow man happier. To establish this fact does not refer in any way to the antithesis of egoism and altruism, of materialism and idealism, of individualism and collectivism, of atheism and religion. There are people whose only aim is to improve the condition of their own ego. There are other people with whom awareness of the troubles of their fellow men causes as much uneasiness, or even more uneasiness, than their own wants. There are people who desire nothing else than the satisfaction of their appetites for sexual intercourse, food, drinks, fine homes, and other material things. But other men care more for the satisfactions commonly called, quote, higher and, quote, ideal. There are individuals eager to adjust their actions to the requirements of social cooperation. There are, on the other hand, refractory people who defy the rules of social life. There are people for whom the ultimate goal of the earthly pilgrimage is the preparation for a life of bliss. There are other people who do not believe in the teachings of any religion and do not allow their actions to be influenced by them. Praxeology is indifferent to the ultimate goals of action. Its findings are valid for all kinds of action, irrespective of the ends aimed at. It is a science of means, not of ends. It applies the terms happiness in a purely formal sense. In the praxeological terminology, the proposition, man's unique aim is to attain happiness, is tautological. It does not imply any statement without the state of affairs from which man expects happiness. The idea that the incentive of human activity is always some uneasiness, and its aim always to remove such uneasiness as far as possible, that is, to make the acting man feel happier, is the essence of the teachings of eudaimonism and hedonism. Epicurean, some Greek word, I don't read Greek so I can't pronounce it, and I don't know what it is that state of perfect happiness and contentment at which all human activity aims without ever wholly attaining it. In the face of the grandeur of this cognition, it is of little avail only that many representatives of this philosophy failed to recognize the purely formal character of the notions pain and pleasure, and gave them a material and carnal meaning. The theological, mystical, and other schools of a heteronomous ethic did not shake the core of Epicureanism because they could not raise any other objection than its neglect of higher and nobler pleasures. It is true that the writings of many earlier champions of eudaimonism, hedonism, and utilitarianism are in some points open to misinterpretation, but the language of modern philosophers, and still more of the modern economists, is so precise and straightforward that no misinterpretation can possibly occur. Okay, so obviously I think Mises was wrong on that because we're having this exchange. The point of me reading this section is just to show that, the economist is not claiming to know what will make someone happy. I know that you are studying positive psychology and that there is apparently a science of objectively what will make people happier. But happiness is being applied in a very, very formal sense. Like you gave an example in a previous video about an alcoholic who, they act upon their valuation of getting more alcohol. They know this isn't going to make them happier from their own perspective. However, from their own perspective, at that time, the point is that they felt uneasiness. There was some sort of uneasiness that they wanted to relieve. And the means to relieving that, that uneasiness, as they perceived it, was to buy more alcohol and consume more alcohol. And that's getting to what I think would be a definition of value, is that it is a preference relationship ranking and this is from the individual's perception of this, the ability of a means to remove felt uneasiness. Now, men can err in these judgments, obviously. I can think that, jumping off of a building will cure my AIDS, but I will probably find out, and I could act upon that, jump off a building, as opposed to, taking retroviral drugs or anything like that. And I may find that my evaluation of that means was incorrect. But essentially, I think it just comes down to each individual's perception, how effective they judge a means at removing their own felt uneasiness. Like I said, I prefer Mises to Rothbard in economics, at least so far. I'm reading Man, Economy, and State right now. But Mises is a lot more clear about these kinds of things in Human Action. His rhetoric is a lot less about increasing satisfaction and becoming happier, and a lot more about the use of means to remove felt uneasiness, which I think is far more precise and a lot more clear. I don't know if you've read Human Action. It seems you're focusing a lot more on Rothbard's stuff, but if you haven't, I really encourage you to read Human Action. It's one of my favorite books. And even if you disagree with it, I'm sure you will find a lot of it very interesting. I'm going to pause here for 1 second. I will be back because I need to look and see if I missed anything from your video. Okay, and you also say that, utility is something that these goods must have. And again, that's if I am interpreting this correctly, and I may be misunderstanding you, there is no intrinsic value to anything. The value is an attribute that man attaches to each good. And mostly I would talk of value not as a noun, but as a verb, as a process. Evaluation is more what I talk about. It's man's weighing of means against one another, his own perception of how they will remove his felt uneasiness. So I've already talked about that. Let's see if I missed anything else. Okay, so I probably stopped that analysis a little too early. So you also talked about how there is a little bit of value in all of these things, like killing yourself, shoving a knife up your ass, getting married, any of those things. There's a little bit of value. And again, it's not that there is value in the things, it is that I evaluate these different modes of action, these different means to attain certain ends. It's how I judge the effectiveness of those means to attain certain ends. It's not that they have value, that there is utility in marriage, that there is utility in shoving a knife up my ass. That there, it's an attribute. It is an evaluation. It's a process, not a noun to me. At least that's how I interpret it, and I think that's probably the most effective way to interpret it. Okay, then towards the end of the video, you say, if the things that you do are things that have value, then the things you don't do are the things that don't have value. And again, this is it's the same thing. It's that they were evaluated differently. Um, the mode of action that I chose, the means that I chose to achieve whatever action it was the most highly valued, as in evaluated, as in weighed against others. I perceived this means to be more effective at removing my felt uneasiness than this alternative means. It is not that the alternative means doesn't have value. None of them have value. There's no quantity called value. There is nothing intrinsic about this. It is only what the mind attaches to it. And I'm not really understanding the whole issue that you're seeing with a lot of libertarian rhetoric. You seem to have this concept of libertarians, thinking that, oh, only the individual knows what will make them ultimately happy. And I'm sympathetic to that, but if there is a science, if positive psychology can tell us, what will actually in reality make people happier, if we have some objective standard to measure that by, I'm open to that. But only the individual is in a position to know what uneasiness they are feeling. I can't know the uneasiness nor the degree of the uneasiness, the urgency of which that uneasiness must be with which that uneasiness must be removed. Only the individual is in a position to evaluate that, to know that. Now, whether or not the means they adopt to remove that felt uneasiness are appropriate means is not a question for economics. It is only that they do evaluate means on a ordinal scale and act upon those means. That's all there is to it. I mean, I don't really understand what the issue with the rhetoric is. And the other thing is, I'm kind of wary of this whole positive psychology thing and your willingness to use the state. At least this is how I've interpreted you. I don't want to put words in your mouth. Your willingness to use the state to make people happy. Because this sounds like a lot like the basis for a lot of awful dystopian science fiction. That sounds kind of crazy to me. Okay, this is from I think chapter 7, Action Within the World, section 1, The Law of Marginal Utility. This is page 119 in the Scholar's Edition of Human Action. Acting man values things as means for the removal of his uneasiness. From the point of view of the natural sciences, the various events which result in satisfying human needs appear as very different. Acting man sees in these events only a more or a less of the same kind. In valuing very different states of satisfaction and the means for their attainment, man arranges all things in one scale and sees in them only their relevance for an increasing in his own satisfaction. And pause for a second. That again, that's one of the few times that Mises frames his argument like that. Most of the time, it's just the removal of felt uneasiness. All right, getting back into it. The satisfaction derived from food and that derived from the enjoyment of a work of art are, in acting man's judgment, a more urgent or a less urgent need. Valuation and action place them in one scale of what is more intensively desired and what is less. For acting man, there exists primarily nothing but various degrees of relevance and urgency with regard to his own well-being. Okay, and that concludes my video because I have run out of time. If you guys want to read more of that quote, just find it in Human Action. Great book. That's it. Bye. Okay, see ya. Start the reactor.